You've seen this term everywhere, right? Sex addiction. It's all over the news, from celebrity scandals to ads for therapy. But what if I told you that in the scientific community, there's this huge debate about whether it's even a real thing? That's exactly the controversy we're going to dig into today. So let's just cut right to the chase. What's the real story here? Is this a genuine clinical condition, something actually wired into our brains? Or is it just a convenient excuse, a label we slap on behavior that we as a society don't like? Answering that one question is what this whole explainer is about. And this quote right here, it really hits the nail on the head when it comes to the skepticism. See, with something like heroin, you can physically see tolerance. You need more and more to get the same high, and you can see withdrawal. But with compulsive sexual behavior, it's way harder to pin those classic signs down. And that's a huge reason why the scientific world has been so torn on this. So how do we get to the bottom of this? Well, we've got to look past the headlines and dive into the actual scientific models. And these aren't just people's opinions. These are competing frameworks, all trying to explain the very real suffering that this kind of out-of-control behavior can cause. Okay, so the front runner in the scientific world is this thing called the incentive motivation model. The core idea is that in the brain, this compulsive behavior looks a lot like a classic drug addiction. But to really get it, we first need a quick look at how our brain's whole motivation system is set up. You know, most of us probably think of desire as just one thing. But our brains are way more complicated. It actually has these three different networks that are kind of battling it out all the time. A network for wanting something, another one for liking it once you get it, and a really crucial third one for inhibition, basically our brain's brake pedal. Okay, this right here, this is probably the most important thing to get. Wanting is the engine. It's the chase, the craving, that powerful urge to go after something. And it's all powered by the neurotransmitter dopamine. Liking, on the other hand, is the actual pleasure, the enjoyment you get from the reward. That's driven by your brain's natural opioids. Now, in a healthy brain, these two work together. But the key idea in addiction is that they can get dangerously, completely disconnected. And that brings us to this key concept, incentive sensitization. Basically, the theory goes that the wanting system, the one running on dopamine, just goes completely haywire. It becomes hypersensitive. So suddenly, simple little things in your environment, a certain website, a specific time of day, can trigger this massive, overwhelming craving. And here's the crazy part. This happens even when the person knows the reward itself, the liking part, isn't even that great anymore. The craving just takes on a life of its own. So you can picture this whole thing as a constant tug of war happening inside your brain. On one side, you have your automatic gut-level impulses, that raw pull of temptation. And on the other side, you have your conscious, goal-oriented self, the part that wants to stick to your values, like being faithful to a partner. In this model, addiction is what happens when that automatic wanting system just completely overpowers your brain's ability to say stop. And check this out. If you look at where the actual research is going, it tells a really clear story. This chart shows that the vast majority of studies are focused on that wanting part of the brain. That's no accident. It's a huge clue that scientists believe the wanting system is where the real problem is. All right, so that's the addiction model in a nutshell. But what about all the other explanations you hear? Let's take a minute and tackle what the research says this is not. Okay, first one. Isn't this just someone with a really high sex drive? The research shows a pretty clear difference here. The absolute hallmark of addiction is that feeling of internal conflict and suffering. For instance, one study found that men with these compulsive behaviors actually wanted fewer partners than their behavior led them to have. Their wanting was out of sync with their goals. Someone with just a high sex drive, they're usually perfectly happy with their desires. There's no conflict. All right, what about OCD? Could it be that? Well, turns out that doesn't really fit either, but for a totally different reason. Addiction is all about seeking pleasure, at least at first. The thoughts are experienced as erotic. OCD is the complete opposite. The behavior is all about avoiding anxiety, and the obsessive sexual thoughts are usually felt as disgusting and unwanted. And the last big one, maybe it's just a simple lack of impulse control, right? Except a lot of people report these really detailed, elaborate plans. That's not impulsive, that's the opposite of impulsive. It seems to be what they call domain-specific, meaning someone might have perfect control over their spending or eating, but it all falls apart when they're hit with a specific sexual trigger. Okay, so if we run with this incentive motivation model, it begs the next big question. Why? Why do some people's brains seem more vulnerable to this wanting system going haywire than others? Well, research points to a few major culprits that can really mess with this system. Stress is a total double whammy. It weakens your brain's ability to say no, while at the same time making that dopamine wanting system even more sensitive. Your teenage brain is also a setup for this, because your go system, the part that seeks rewards, develops way faster than your stop system. And tragically, we see a very strong link between early life abuse and a higher chance of developing these behaviors later on. Get ready for this number, 96%. In some studies, that is the estimated overlap between this compulsive sexual behavior and other mental health issues, like anxiety and mood disorders. That is a staggering number. And what it tells us is that this kind of behavior almost never happens in isolation. It's almost always tangled up with other kinds of deep psychological pain. All right, so we've gone through the brain science, the different arguments, the risk factors, but what does this all mean for real life? How do we get from all this science to actual solutions? If there is one single thing you take away from all this, let it be this. Addiction is not a disease of liking something too much. It's a disease of wanting. It's a problem where the brain's motivation engine goes rogue and drives behavior against a person's own best interests. And the cool thing is, this model doesn't just explain the problem. It actually points us toward a solution. The goal isn't just to, grit your teeth and resist. It's about actively rewiring the brain. That means working to strengthen your conscious, goal-directed control, while at the same time weakening the power of those automatic triggers. It's about bringing the brain's systems back into balance. And all of this leaves us with one last, and I think really hopeful question. The very thing that makes our brains vulnerable, their incredible ability to learn and form powerful habits, might also be the key to fixing it. So if our brains can be trained to want so intensely, can they be retrained to want differently? Can we actually train our brains to align what we deeply crave with who we truly want to be? And all the science we're seeing, it's starting to suggest that the answer is a resounding yes.